Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Life by Design podcast. On this week's episode, I talk with Emma Dunwoody. Emma is a human design expert, master coach, behavioral specialist, and the host of the #1 global human design podcast. She wakes people up to the power within them using this unique method of transformational human design, a system of self-knowledge and guidance unlike anything else that exists. In this week's episode, expect to learn about human design, how to use human design for relationships and parenting, where people use human design as an excuse, how to respond to life, and much, much more. Enjoy the episode. Now, guys, before we start this week's episode of the podcast, I want to talk to you about the Life by Design Mastermind. The Life by Design Mastermind is the mastermind for go-getters and high achievers who are looking to create a more successful, fulfilling, and balanced life by design. If you're serious about transforming your life, achieving your goals, and living a life on your terms, then the Life by Design is your golden ticket. Head over to the show notes and click on the link for more details about the program. Emma Dunwoody, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
My friend, 6 months ago, I reckon, we caught up in person.
Yeah.
I knew you were local. I didn't know much about you. And then I don't think I told you this. I looked you up quickly before and saw that you're human design. I was like, Shani would fucking love this girl. So I told Shani, my partner, and she's like, oh my God, you're having dinner with her. And then it turns out you're quite the big deal in the human design space, of which I'm still very much an amateur, but I'm surrounded by women in particular who know a lot about it and who actually know more about me than I do when it comes to human design. I'm so interested in learning a lot more about it today. But for the guys that don't know about you and your work, can you give a 60 or 90 second spiel of who you are and what's got you to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So in a nutshell, and I'm really not great at short answers, but I'll do my very best. In a nutshell, I had a very successful advertising career. Amidst that, I burnt out. I was diagnosed with depression and panic disorder, given a diagnosis that I would never heal from it, but I'd learned to manage it. And basically that was the catalyst for me to really understand myself better than I'd understood myself before, because I was convinced that if I could work out how I got myself into this situation, I could get myself out of this situation. So that sent me on a 20+ year journey to retrained. So left the advertising industry, became a master coach, started a business. I was working with the C-suite, with teams, with leadership, with behavioral coaching, and loved it, except there was like this piece missing. So when kind of putting it out there, I'd felt like I'd banged against every door and, just wanted to headbutt the table because I could not find this missing piece. Kind of put it out to the universe. Please, you need to be so obvious. What is it? And human design just showed up in the following 48 hours. Everyone I spoke to or I got an email. And back then, no one was talking about it. Like no one even knew what it was. So I just followed the thread and discovered this thing called human design. And initially, I was very much like, oh God, I don't want to introduce this to my CEOs. Like it's a little bit out there. I'm much more happy doing the disc profiling or the behavior transformational coaching. But I'd kind of made a promise by that stage. I'd started my human design experiment. I was getting great results. So I integrated it into my business. And then look, to be honest, the rest is kind of history. I just followed my strategy and authority. And what you see today is the results of that.
I find diagnosis around depression and not overcoming it fascinating. I've been in a pretty dark place myself at one point in time. How did they get to a point of saying that you wouldn't overcome it? Like what symptoms or signs led them to that as an outcome?
Well, that's a really great question. To be honest, he hardly asked me anything. He just diagnosed me. If I'm really honest, he spent more time talking about an ancestor of mine because I'm related to a famous explorer, Sir Ernest Shackleton. And he probably spent 15 minutes actually talking to me about the mental health stuff and then just gave me that diagnosis. And I mean, a lot of people say that now. And I suppose my one caveat is this is like 20 years ago and so much has changed. And back then they thought that we couldn't change our brains. They didn't think that neuroplasticity existed past the age of like 18 to 20. So they really did believe back then that we couldn't do anything about it. So it was this whole, you'll just have to medicate. You'll just have to, yes, there's lifestyle things that'll help improve it, but you won't heal it. And gratefully for me, I was right on the cusp of when it's just before neuroscience started to really hit the ground. And I read two books that had such a massive impact on me. One of them was The Brain That Changed Itself and The Science of Happiness. And once I read those two books, I was like, yeah, what he said is BS. I absolutely can change my brain and heal from this.
So, how do you go from depression to human design? And also for someone starting out in human design, I mean, which your book speaks to nicely, but is for someone starting out in human design, like in one paragraph, as best you can, how would you describe human design to someone who's starting out?
Well, the way I describe it is I wouldn't give you any of the standard, banter about it. I would tell you from my experience, human design is really similar to behavioral and personality profiling tools. Enneagram's massive right now, Myers-Briggs, disc profiling. But all of those are, we get to the answer through asking questions. So there's a huge questionnaire. And if we have a really good facilitator, we go through that process and they can be pretty accurate. But the problem is that we're doing it with the mind. Okay. So we're answering questions with the mind, which tells us that we're actually answering questions from who we think we are. Human design is actually something that is our energetic blueprint. It sits below the behavior, it sits below the personality, and it informs those things. And this is actually a reading that is taken at the time of birth, your birthday, obviously, the city you were born in, and the country. And the reason why it's that particular reading is that there are these subatomic particles called neutrinos, which you can go and Google. There's a huge facility in Japan that is studying them, like millions, even maybe billions of dollars worth of research are going into these things because they're fundamental to our universe, and they leave an imprint of the things that they've passed through. So they actually imprint us at birth, and this actually becomes this energetic blueprint that we operate from. So ultimately, it's very similar to those things, except the accuracy is like 10x, 50x compared to the other tools.
So unless things have changed, there's 4 to 5 main types, 4 types.
So there's 4 types and one hybrid. So a lot of people will talk
Ah,
about 5 types.
yep.
Technically, there's 4 and a hybrid.
Can you give a summary of the 4 types and just maybe some traits of which people might start to identify with?
Sure. So manifestors, these are the people on the planet that are here to inspire us into action. They're the trailblazers, the initiators, the people with the new ideas. They start things. These people can be polarizing because they're very much on the planet to inspire particular people, like their people. So, in fact, the guy who brought human design into the world is a manifestor or was a manifestor. So, it's about starting the idea, the concept, even the business. Then generators and their hybrid friend, manifesting generators, which I'll get to in a minute. Once inspired into action, these are the people that follow what lights them up. It's the things that they have energy for, and they actually build the new world. They're the ones that actually put pen to paper. They're actually, not to say that the others can't do these things, but they're the ones that literally build this new world or build the paradigm. Manifesting generators, they are a hybrid of manifestors and generators, and they are fundamentally generators. So they're here to respond to life. Both are here to respond to life, not initiate like manifestors. And the MGs are non-linear. That means that they're kind of these multi-passionate. They can seem and often feel too much because they have a lot of energy. They want to study different things, do different things. They want to break things and remake things. But these people are really here to demonstrate human potential. They can be a little bit larger than life. So once we've been inspired, we're put it into action, then we have the projectors. So the projectors sort of look at all of this stuff, and these are our great guides, the people who can see efficiencies. So they can look at everything that's going on and say, hey, if you do less of this and more of that, then this is going to be even better. So they can really tweak and improve upon things because they're very good at seeing into other people. They also need to be very conscious because their wisdom has to be invited in. So there's this challenge that projectors can have that unless they're invited in, they can feel like they're very much kind of on the outer, and that can make them feel quite bitter. And then we have reflectors, which are the smallest group, and they reflect back the truth of what is going on. So that could be in a relationship, that could be in a family or a business, in a country, like whatever it is, it's reflecting back the energy that surrounds them.
So for you, obviously this is your jam. Where do you start to put these five, can't even think of the name for them, like
Types.
5 types? Where do you look at this across the board? So I would assume in business, in intimate relationship, in normal relationships. Is there other areas that you think, I mean, every area of life, but is there others that stand out to you of like, okay, you really want to consider your human design in this specific area of life? Is there any that stand out other than kind of business, friendships, and intimate relationships?
Parenting. Absolutely parenting. So
Interesting.
this has probably been one of the, absolute game changers for me as a mother, but also my community. Like we have a lot of parents. We've done a whole series on the podcast on parenting with human design because we're kind of taught, right? We've got this golden rule. And the golden rule is treat others as you would like to be treated. But what human design does for us is it teaches us to treat others as they're designed to be treated. So, excuse me, when you have another person's human design, then you stop projecting who you are onto them and you start to see them for who they really are. So, maybe you have, let's say, talking about kids, I've got 2 manifesting generators, okay? So putting them in after school sport, letting them run around, giving them, they have a lot of freedom. They have a lot of boundaries as well, but they also have a lot of freedom. So they're actually being raised in a way to trust their natural state. They're also being raised in a way that really works for them. Now, you can go really nuanced into their design, and I'll give you an example with my eldest. My eldest didn't necessarily thrive in regular school. And in his design, you can really dive in and say, look, it's that, and it's that, and it's that. He's at quad right, which is kind of down into the real details. But one of the big things that he needed to understand was it was more important to be present because he takes in more information than it was to take notes. So we could kind of help him navigate his learning in a way that he's designed to learn. Now, that actually took him down a path of saying, hey, Mum, I actually want to change schools. I want to go to Steiner. And he led it. We got him in. Of course we did. Everyone's like, how did you even get your children in? And I was just like, I don't know. It was really easy. But again, we were following strategy and authority. Like we were just following the bouncing ball. And now he's like an A, B student. He's thriving. He loves every second of it. And at no point did I force him to do things the way most people would have done it because they think they're doing the right thing, but it isn't because it's just not the way it's designed. So, I think parenting is so important. I mean, the other example I want to use is if you have a manifestor child, like this is a kid that needs so much freedom. Like you need to give this kid freedom. If you have a projector child and they're in like after school sports, you need to get them out of after school sports because when they go to school, it's exhausting because they're taking in everybody else's energy. So I really think like parenting is one of the most important places that human design can really support people.
So long story short, seconds after Shani and I, or Shani gives birth, we'll call you to organise our daughter's human design.
Yep, that's it. That's what my friends do. Like
That's
just send me the time of her birth. And the thing is that you'll know straight away. Like when my niece was born, I did the same thing. And, it was beautiful because I would say, okay, well, this is what her design looks like. But, who knows? Let's just see who she becomes. Like don't attach anything to her. And to the letter, this kid is exactly her design, And the beauty is when she was a little bit willful, let's say, and she didn't want to eat in certain ways, her mom would just be like, hey, is there anything you can help me out with in her design? I'd be like, well, let me just have another look at it. Oh yeah, try this, try that. And it would help my sister-in-law actually work with her instead of going against what her natural energy is wanting to do.
This will seem really obvious to you and it's just becoming more and more obvious to me. Like imagine how much more aligned and authentic parenting would be if every parent understood their kid's human design. I'm
Exactly.
guessing that must just like cheer you up a little bit.
Well, I think the biggest thing, one of the, the initial directives, if you like, of human design was that although it will be wonderful for all the generations on planet Earth right now, it's actually for the children.
Mm.
Because if our children are raised in alignment with their design, they don't need people like you and me because they don't need to heal their trauma. They don't need to, you know, get over people pleasing and trying to force themselves to be someone they're not. And, their cognitive dissonance will be tiny because they've been free to be themselves from the word go and ultimately trust their own inner authority. I think this is a big thing with raising my kids. Like, I have rules and boundaries. I've, quite a few of them. Kids need boundaries. It makes them feel safe. But let's say, with them being both manifesting generators, one of the reasons we moved to live in Byron Bay was so they could have the freedom that they needed, because they need freedom as MGs. The other way that was beautiful to know what I needed to know was when I separated from my ex-husband. Both my children are line fours. And what that means is that their safety is derived from relationships. So I knew as their mother, the number one thing I had to do is be consistent in my relationship with them individually. And if I could do that, then they're going to feel, as safe as they can possibly feel. Obviously, it's still bumpy and it's still challenging, but really navigating through things in that way, it's a total game changer.
This has already blown my mind, just in terms of the
pretty cool.
parenting. There's so much. Shani knows me better than I know myself when it comes to this stuff, but I'm more interested in how this will show up for our daughter.
Yeah.
Other than having a super detailed human design reading, and Shani will be all over it within hours, I assume she'll be looking at. But what suggestion would you give to parenting or parents around parenting and the human design other than knowing it?
So I think that there is this really cool thing that I tested with my kids that the guy who actually channeled all this information, Ra, talks about. He's like, you don't need to tell your kids anything, but if you can show them a picture of their design, it's like it activates it. It's like it activates it in their DNA. And, that's what I did many years ago. And my kids, I mean, the way they navigate through life, and yes, they have a mum that's helping them all the time. And yes, there's sort of other contributing factors, but it's as simple as that. But ultimately, and this is the same whether it's parenting, whether it's children, whether it's business, whether it's, trying to find your purpose, wanting to earn more money, the fundamental thing is, number one, understand your energy by type. Okay. So what does your energy look like? Is it consistent or is it inconsistent? Does your life represent the energy that you are, your being? Number two, you want to know your strategy, which is how you're kind of guided through life. And you want to know your authority. Your inner authority is how you make decisions via your internal guidance system. And if you just follow those things, then everything else will fall into line. You don't have to, be like me and go down the rabbit hole and learn all the nuances and, go and find the gene keys, which is also, part of this. And you don't need to do all of that. You just, with some really simple high level things, which is why I wrote the book, Human Design Made Simple, with the really fundamental high level stuff broken down into experiments that you can do so you can integrate this into your everyday life, into your body. And then really, you don't need to know any more than that.
I'm going to get a little bit like selfish for a moment
Yeah, go.
because I have so much that I know you can teach me. So if we're talking surface level, I have generator 3-5 sacral. That's all I know.
Cool.
What can you tell me about me that might be worth me considering?
Yeah, okay. So number one is, as a generator, your strategy is to respond. Now, especially in your space, in personal development, in coaching, what are we taught? Maybe not so much today, but literally for the last 2 decades, we're taught to go out and take massive action. We're taught to go out and initiate. And the truth is that there's a very small group of the population, i.e. manifestors, that can actually initiate. You're designed to respond. You're actually designed to go, okay, well, look, I think, or at least I feel, I want to create X in my world. And once you put that intention out in the world, your aura, your energy actually draws towards you all the things that could possibly take you to that destination. And they're outside of you, so they're not necessarily ideas, but as they show up in your life, the moment they turn up, you instantly know, yep, I got energy for that. Nope, I don't have energy for that. Your gut is going to tell you. And if you can actually master just following your gut instead of letting your mind jump in and override and say, well, what about this should? If you can get rid of all of that, then it's going to take you down exactly the path that you need to go with least resistance, most flow. Like this is the point, is that when we're in alignment with our design, we are minimizing resistance and increasing flow. So
I've got one wrong so far. I've just put an X next to the way I'm doing life on that front.
oh my God, hilarious. And
That's great.
And
That's
I think
good.
that one of the big things to understand, and most of the population, so more than 70% generators or manifesting generators, and everything that I'm telling you is also true for manifesting generators. It's this fundamental thing. If you shift into responding to life, then everything changes. So I'll give you a couple of examples that have happened to me. My podcast, for example. I was in the shower where I get so many of my downloads, and I just had this idea. I'm like, it was an inspiration. And that was to change the name of my podcast to the Human Design Podcast. My ego instantly went into free fall. You can't do that. Who are you? You don't know anything. Like just went on. And I was like, well, I'm just doing my experiment so I don't have to act on it. It's in my head. It's not out there in the world. So I wrote it down in my journal and just waited for something to show up. And the next day I was on the phone to one of my mentors and he said to me, you need to do a podcast on this. And I was like, are you kidding me? And like in that minute, I'm like, okay. So I did the podcast, even though my mind was like, nah. There was so much fear, didn't want to do it. I just followed it. And, now like it's one of the leading human design podcasts, if not the leading human design podcast globally, just because I got out of my own way. I just followed it. And this happens all the time. Like when you're in response, like there was a person I really wanted to work with. And, I'd slowly maybe dropped a DM into their Instagram, and I knew that when I first started making it sort of a connection, I was just a kind of a nobody, not even on their radar. But I just left it. I just kind of just left it, put the intention there, reached out once or twice, said congratulations when they had a baby, just little things. And then over time, a relationship started to build that was actually came from that person, not from me. Until one day I'm sitting on the couch working on my business and I get a message from this person saying, hey, can you come and teach in my community? I'm like, yeah, I can. But at no point did I go out and say, I want to teach in your community. It was an intention, it was a goal, but I left it alone. I just waited to respond to all the little breadcrumbs along the way, and it came to me.
Did you, before we continue on, but did you find that hard, that transition? The reason I ask is there's the ego and identity I feel that I've formed over a long time that is very much a take action person as opposed to a responding type. Did you go through a similar process or does that come more naturally to
Yeah,
you?
I mean, absolutely. Absolutely. And there is actually one of the really detailed parts of my chart is all about action. So I've actually had to do a lot of work on not taking a lot of action. I've really had to like rewire my identity, change my beliefs so that I can do less to receive more. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest challenges most people have when they first come to human design. They have this misunderstanding that, oh, do I just sit around on my hands? It's like, no, but you end up taking aligned action. So just because you don't run out and try and approach this person you really want to, connect with and work with, it's about just taking that intention, putting it out in the world, and then taking aligned action. So, maybe a friend says, hey, have you heard of so and so? And you're like, yeah, I have. And there might be some link. Like a friend of mine there's another stage that I want to get on to talk to speak, and a friend of mine knows this person directly, and part of me, the old me, would be doing everything to make that happen. Like she's had direct connection with him. He said, yep, he's definitely interested. And the old me would be like, well, what can I do to make that happen? But the me is like, when I am the person that is going to be perfect for that role, it'll happen. I know it's inevitable. And she actually said to me at one point, because he'd said, oh yeah, we'd love to have her come along to this event that he's taking, that he's creating. And she said, oh, I'm sorry, he hasn't come back to me. And I'm like, don't worry, it's inevitable. It's going to happen, but I don't need to get involved. So the whole thing is it's like retraining yourself to trust the process.
So we've spoken about respond and then take aligned action, which sounds like a very good rule of thumb. So when it comes to 3-5, what do I need to know about those numbers?
Yeah, cool. So those two numbers are what we call your profile. In the original knowledge, they call it the costume of your purpose. And me being me, I'm also a 3-5, actually. The 5 is very practical. So I'm like, what does that mean? So what it really means is your two numbers are your how you move through life, how you learn, how you serve, what people want from you. The two most significant themes that kind of move you on your purpose. So the 3 is the experimenter, the experiential learner. Just really quickly, like the line 1, if you have a line 1, this is the investigator. They're the knowledge, the people that gather knowledge, gather information. They want to get to the bottom of things. They want to close the gap of knowledge everywhere they go. So they often become authorities because they gather a lot of information and then they have a lot of knowledge. The line 2s, they're the naturally talented. So they kind of learn, grow, and evolve and serve through their natural talents. Then the line 3s, it's all about your experiences. So people really want to know your personal experiences. They want to hear how it worked or didn't work for you. The line 3s also have this trial and error. So we kind of fall down and get back up. Like we get to a point where we actually become very resilient because nothing kind of goes as it should the first time for us. So we kind of learn through falling down and getting back up. But what that creates is a person that can call out what doesn't work. So most people will come to us for our advice because we know what really does work and what doesn't work. These are also people who want, like you probably want to live a non-conventional life, which I think you're already doing, a lot of travel, a lot of adventure. The line 3s do not want to be kind of put in a box, if that makes sense.
That speaks to me.
Yeah.
So just from a personal point of view for you, how have you navigated that personal experience? Because I think from what I remember, Shani said, I don't know if it's the 3 or it's the 5, but we're also notorious for being pulled down, I think, based on.
So with the line 5 has a projection field. Now, as a behavioral coach, when I first heard that, I'm like, we all project it. Like we see the world as we are, not as it is. We're all projecting. But what the nuance to the line 5 is that other people actually project their wound onto you. So, in my 20s, what that looked like is I'd be at some social event, the races or something cool. And someone in the office would come up to me after way too many drinks and say, wow, I thought you were such a cow, but actually it turns out you're lovely. And it happened to me a few times and I was like, what is going on? But it was just that line 5 being projected onto. So the line 5 is this energy of the leader. They're the healer. So when we heal ourselves first, then we get less of the resourceful projections like that. We can be like the superhero. We're the person that people come to help solve their problems. We're the ear that everyone needs to talk it out. We're the broad shoulders. And we have to have rock solid boundaries because otherwise every second human we come across will literally want us just to save them. And that's not what we're here for. We're absolutely here to support the people that we're here to support. And yeah, boundaries are super important. The line 5s are also very powerful leaders and they have this inner drive for impact and often global impact. So on my podcast, I think the most predominant line number of all the guests that I've interviewed would be the line 5. No surprise because these are people who are driven to have a global impact.
The rock solid boundaries is really interesting. I had a session only 2 days ago with like an intuitive osteo in Suffolk. Actually, it's really cool if you want someone who's out there. And he pretty much spoke to that in terms of new boundaries for 2025 and who I choose to work with. And I don't know if this has shown up for you. I thought I was pretty good, but upon reflection, he's like, are you carrying many people? And I was like, relative to where I used to be, not really, but he spoke to that directly. How has that shown up for you in your work and the need to strengthen the boundaries?
Yeah, good question. So I'll give you the shortest version, but a bit of a timeline. So as a kid, I was always that one that all my friends came to when something was going on. So by the time I, hit my 20s and 30s, my identity was that I was the problem solver. I was the one that would fly in. Then when I started to study to become a coach, I realized, wow, like I need to put boundaries around that. So in the beginning, I thought I had good boundaries, but I didn't. I was still like any person that reached out and wanted help, I'd just be like, yep, sure. If anyone reached out on Instagram, here I am, like 2 hours later, engaged in a conversation. Even as my business grew, like especially when I started to get some incredible interviews, whether I'm on someone's podcast or interviewing them or whatever. And what would happen is inevitably they would be like, oh my God, will you do a session for me? And I'd go, yeah, sure. And I'll do it for free. Like just so quick, just to give away my value. So every kind of almost year, I'm just like checking in. I'm just like checking in, like, where am I leaking my superhero energy? Where am I leaking this, and not valuing it? Because every time you grow and evolve, your boundaries have to grow and evolve with you. You know this. And I think that as a line five, like I love working with line fives because these people are really impactful. So if I want to work with really high end anybody, then I need to have really solid boundaries around those people that I, one-on-one am helping. And at the end of the day, like I have so many offers. There are so many ways that people can learn from me, and they can do it for free if they really want to. Not that that necessarily serves them, because they don't have a financial investment. They probably won't do the work anyway. But yeah, I think that's really the biggest thing. Is that the other thing from a profile perspective is we're both a personal profile. So what can happen is a personal profile means that it's really about our personal journey first. But what can happen is our line five hijacks that and says, but there's this whole planet. We've got all this stuff and we need to universalize it. We need to give it to everyone. We need to show everyone. We need to tell everyone. And it kind of hijacks us off our own personal journey. So it's like just making sure that you come back into you and say, okay, well, let's just talk about me for a second. Where do I want to go? Who do I want to be? What do I want to experience? Because if you're serving you first, then all of those experiences, all of those solutions that, the line five is very practical, all of those practicalities, you will give to the other, but you can't go there first. You have to go there for yourself first.
Yeah, I resonate with that deeply. I am a sacral and Shani is an emotional. What would I need to know about those two to best support my dear fiance?
This is such a beautiful question. Like, I can't begin to tell you what a nice question this is. So half of the global population is sacral, and it's nearly half. Half the population is emotional, and then sacral is the next largest authority, but half the planet are non-emotional. Okay. So we've got half and half. Now, if you're a non-emotional being, everything just happens from the sacral. And an emotion, you're going to be experiencing, when you experience one of your emotions, you kind of like, let's say you witness the birth of your daughter, you cry. It's amazing. It's incredible. And honestly, like maybe an hour later, you're like, yep, cool. Okay, what's next? Whereas an emotional being is constantly in an emotional wave, always, and it's mechanical. So your emotions, let's say you get really emotional around a certain type of person because it triggers something from your childhood and you get really emotional then. That's a trauma response. That's something that you've learned. You can heal that. You can change that. You can let go of that. But an emotional person has a mechanical wave. It's always there. They're always going to be going high, middle, high, always, constantly. And when you can just let an emotional person be emotional, and the caveat that I always share with people is like, we don't indulge in our emotions and we don't suppress our emotions, but when we're just with our emotions, if you can give emotional people time and space, if you can honor that they are in a mechanical wave, there is not much they can do about it. Now, yes, you can improve it. I know for me, I was a lot more emotional when I was younger, but that was because I was dealing with a lot of trauma. But now, not so much, but it's still constantly there. And one of the challenges often in a relationship like yours is that you're like, I know my, yep, yeah, it's a yes. It's a yes. Like, why are you taking, it's a yes. And she's like, I don't know.
I've started to play with that since she taught me, because sometimes it's 24 hours before she needs to come back. And I was like wanting an answer straight away.
Yeah.
And realizing
it could be 2 weeks. I mean, the thing is, it could be 2 weeks. Like,
yeah,
really giving your emotional the emotionals in your life, the time and space, because the more time pressure they have, the further away the clarity is going to be. And emotional beings really do. Oh, that's what I was going to say. When you have an emotional relationship, which you do because you're taking in her emotions and amplifying them and reflecting them back. If you're unconscious, you're just like riding her emotional wave with her, and it's just going everywhere. So one of the things that's really powerful in a relationship like yours is that you have this space for, let's say, you two have an argument, or there's something that's really irritating the both of you, and she's like, nah, like, can I just sleep on this? So it has to be this place of, yeah, it's fine, let's just talk about it tomorrow. Because if she's in her emotional low, it's going to seem so hard and so bad, and this is the worst thing ever. And then she wakes up the next day and goes, oh God, I think I overreacted. Sorry about that. But it's this constant wave. So if we can honor the movement of the wave and get really wise about, oh, I'm in my low, so I'm going to be maybe, overestimating the bad stuff and underestimating. Sorry, lots of talking. Oh, it's really hot in here too.
Yeah. So just to kind of expand on that and give you a bit of a breather, it's interesting because I've come to learn just to sit with what she wants to say in any kind of heightened state. And I was trying to work out which part of that is, as you're speaking, I'm trying to work out which part of that is the feminine and which part of that is a emotional center, if that's the right language. But to your point, I guess, even playing with the masculine feminine dynamics there is an interesting piece to tie into it. But yeah, I've done a fair bit of work on masculine feminine, not to be pulled into the emotional ups and downs of the feminine as well. So it's interesting hearing you talk about that, and just, I guess, from a masculine point of view, being kind of unwavering in where you stand.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important point. I mean, from my experience, and there's no research on this, but from my experience, a lot of people, men and women, who have sacral authority or they're a non-emotional authority, they can tend to seem more masculine. They can tend to have that because it's easier for them to make, well, at least the sacral and the splenic authorities, they can make quick, fast decisions. They don't have a great deal of emotion. So it can feel that way. I know that my operations manager, she's a sacral 5-1. And it's funny, like, we joke that she's definitely the masculine in the business and I'm the feminine in the business. And she's not necessarily overly masculine, but she's just very pragmatic. She's very outcomes focused. It's for her to make decisions. Like, if we're wavering on a decision, I will often tell her what's going on and just say, sacral says, and she'll be like, yep, nah, So there's definitely a correlation there for sure.
Do you look at relationships and just go, I could make your life easier if you guys knew human design? You'd have to, wouldn't you?
100%. Because you just get people, like there was a story I often tell about my ex. Like, I could not understand why because we always seemed to drive long distances, whether we had friends or like our family lived 3.5 hours away when we were in Sydney. Like, I could never understand why he couldn't drive more than half an hour or 45 minutes without needing a nap. And he'd be like, dude, what is wrong with you? And once I discovered his human design, he's a projector, and projectors don't have the same energy that I have. And I mean, I can drive for 5 hours and I'm fine. Not that I do, I take breaks, people, but that's not the point. So it's even those little nuances that when you start to understand the people that you surround yourself with, so much shifts and changes. I would have taught my kids, just slow down, take your time to make decisions. But I've got 2 sacral kids. So I have I'm lucky to be able to say to them, well, is that a yes, or, is that a yes? Actually letting them make decisions quickly in the moment and teaching them to trust it. So it's incredibly powerful, just understanding how everyone else operates differently from you.
Where do you think people would best use this? So we've spoken about knowing your kids, which Shani and I will be on to ASAP. Obviously, knowing your partner. One other area that this really stood out to me was with a former business partner who was a manifesting generator. And again, I know just the basics, but from what I remember and understand, he worked really well in small blocks, like 90 minutes of work, whereas I just found that I could keep going all day. And he at different times found himself in story of like, maybe I should work more, or maybe I should try to follow, because we lived together at the same time when we were working together. And that became really kind of jarring for him, the stories that would come up for him. But so business associates, partner, kids, is there anywhere else you think this is a really good place to kind of understand and implement?
Well, look, honestly, everywhere in your life, it's going to be super powerful. It really is. But what is like kind of a weird one is you can actually do like your dogs, your cats, your horses. You can
That's
actually look at
wild.
yeah, it's crazy. So I actually have a dressage horse and I've had horses since I was 7, like decades, let's just say that, lots of decades. And I've done it professionally and, headed to a very, very senior level and all of those things. And for so many years doing this over and over and over, I still always had this low grade fear. I mean, I still did it anyway. I evented, I did all the things. It never stopped me, but I always had this low grade fear. Now, when I literally followed my strategy and authority to this horse, I didn't even think I was going to get another horse. From the word go, I didn't have that feeling. And I was kind of like, that's weird. Like, have I finally got over worrying, low grade worry about, my God, I'm on a massive horse and whatever. And when I actually looked at his design, he actually gives me what we call definition in a center that is the house of fear. So he literally switches off all the fear I'm picking up from everyone else. And I just take in his energy. And he's a very grounded, even though he's young and, most young horses are crazy, but he's not. So it's crazy how knowing these things, like we have a border collie who is off tap, like he's just off tap, but he lives in a house with 4 manifesting generators and he's a reflector. So he's reflecting back all of our energy. We also have a long-haired dachshund who is a miniature dachshund that keeps up with said crazy border collie. So it's very interesting. And she's a generator. So it's very interesting to see that as well, like if you're into it.
That's next level. So I'm going to make sure that this episode's out before the end of the year. But for me, as I'm listening to you, I'm kind of thinking about how I integrate better my human design into 2025. I'm thinking business, relationship, and obviously when we bring our little girl in. What would you encourage people to do or think when it comes to human design and integrating it into their life in 2025? Like, where do you start? How do you even navigate that
Yeah.
process?
Yep. So really, once you've got your chart, you can go to my website and grab it. You just want to start experimenting fundamentally with your strategy and authority. Just experiment with it, because ultimately it doesn't matter what area of your life you're in or you're focused on. It's the thing that's going to take you to the, least resistance, most flow. That's what you want to do. So it would just be starting this experiment of, okay, well, I'm going to go into 2025 and from now on, I'm making my decisions. I'm navigating my day through what I have energy for. So, for example, that might mean, in many cases, especially people like you and I, what do? We get up in the morning and we follow our routines. We just do what we've done the day before because it's what got us to our success. But this is more like, okay, well, if I'm going to follow my strategy and authority, I'm going to focus on what I have energy for. Now, let's say you have a chair that you meditate in every day, and if you walk over to that chair, you're like, do I have energy for this? Yep. And most days you're probably going to say yes, because it's something that gives you energy. But then it might be, for example, I fast a lot in the mornings, but I'm not strict about it anymore, because if I walk into the kitchen and I instantly feel like I want to eat, I'm responding to walking into the kitchen, then I'm just going to eat, because obviously my body needs the food. So it's actually something that you can be doing all the time. It's something that it doesn't matter where you are. And ultimately, if you're following strategy and authority, then the rest of your design is going to come into alignment unconsciously anyway. But being a manifesting generator, as I am, like I just want the fast road. We move quickly, we skip steps. And really, like, once you understand strategy, authority, you get into your profile, you understand these things called your not self theme, which is basically your fear expression. Like each type has a specific fear that kind of demonstrates that they're coming from the ego, coming from the mind. And then we also have our signature theme, which is telling us that we're on the right path, we're in alignment, it's working. So I often use these themes, and this is how I teach it. So for you, for example, when you're in alignment, you're feeling satisfaction, that sense of that's a job well done. But when you're out of alignment, you're feeling frustration. So you're frustrated that you're doing too much, you should have said no, or blah, 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 whatever it might be. So when you can't become really aware of these two simple feelings in your body, it's telling you constantly, like, yep, you're on the path. Whoops, you veered off. Come on, back on the path. So these simple things, and again, it's all in my book, these simple things can really, really help you. And I think the other part is understanding the shadows of all of our superpowers. So, for me, for many years, I was like, God, how am I ever going to succeed in business? Because I cannot be consistent. I can't do the 24-hour energetic masculine cycle thing. I just cannot do it. And I tried for years to change it until I came to human design and I understood that I'm a manifesting generator. So I'm non-linear. I'm an emotional being, meaning I'm always in this wave. So I don't have that sort of consistency. And I'm a line 3. So line 3s will tend to want to do all sorts of different things. They're not going to do the same thing every day. So once I started to look at it like that, I could ask myself a much better question. And that was, well, what does consistency look like for me? And once I got that idea, well, everything changed, because consistency for me, my whole business is days, kind of like I work 3 days, then I have 2 days off. Next year, I'm actually moving to 1 week on, 1 week off, because for me, that feels really good. And that's what consistency looks like.
Do you find, and I don't know if this ties into shadow, but do you find that there's people that get caught in story when it comes to their human design, e.g. using that as an excuse? And I ask, you and I, if we kind of zoomed out, it'd be half a degree of separation in terms of our circles to a degree. What I found really interesting, I went to this event in Croatia last year, and just the most successful people I've ever met in my life. And what I found really interesting about that compared to some other circles that I've been part of is a large portion of them knew about human design. And they're like, yeah, I know about human design. I'm this, and this is how it benefits my business. And that was full stop. Not to be dismissive of human design, but just to know how to plug it into their life and their success. And then in other circles that I've been part of previously, or at times I'm still in, it appears like every excuse that they've got is related to their astrology and human design. Do you find the same thing, or am I just?
Yeah, oh my God, I love this so much, because I bang on
Fuck.
about all the time. Because at the end of the day, human design is an experiment, not a dogma. So if you walk around saying, well, I'm a projector, so I don't have energy for that. Well, that is your ego. That is your identity. That's your subconscious mind. That is not your energy at all. And I think that that's one of the things that caused me to create Transformational Human Design, which integrates the gene keys as well as transformational coaching practices, because I'm so tired of hearing all of these stories why people can't do things because of their design. And that is total bullshit. And I just think that it doesn't matter whether it's human design, astrology, trauma. Like, we have to be careful around this. I know that I don't want to upset anyone, and I know that people have really genuine trauma. But I know for me personally, in fact, it's just hit me last week. I was like, holy shit, I was using my trauma to keep me stuck, like just as an excuse, instead of going, yep, it happened and I'm healing it and I'm doing the things, but that's not who I am. So it's exactly the same. So I think that it doesn't matter whether it's human design, it's everything. If we stay in our shadow, if we constantly focus on our shadow, then that's what we're creating. And I think this is the thing that I love, and what I love to focus on is 80% of the time we want to be focusing on our gifts, on our superpowers, on our potential. And when those shadows, those hiccups, those traumas come up, then we deal with them. We face them, we heal them, and then we get back focused on the other stuff. Because at the end of the day, it's just an excuse. If you think that what someone else tells you about you is true, then you've missed the point. Human design is an experiment. Take the information, go and experiment with it, which I have a whole model, which is in the book. Experiment with it and discover what's true for you.
So good. Emma, for people to get hold of your book, find out more about your work, where's the best spot to send them?
So you can head over to emmadunwoody.com. You can get your free chart there, and we'll send you to the podcast episodes of the Human Design podcast that relate to your specific design. You can get the book, like you can get it at the local bookstore here in Byron Bay, but you can get it online. And yeah, come and check out the Human Design podcast as well, because it kind of puts it all together for you.
Unreal. Thank you for jumping on, giving me more insight into human design, and appreciate the work that you continue to do in the world.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me.